Hi, everyone. This is Lady T from In My Own Words, My Thought of the Day. And as I stated in my earlier videos, I'm talking about the effects or the adverse effects of childhood trauma. And so here is the third video in the series that I am creating. And I ran across an article that I wanted to share about trauma handicaps educating Black students. And remember earlier, I told you about how education for students who have had trauma is a very difficult situation for them, and they have issues with learning. And we say that they're learning disabilities, but some of them are learning disabilities. But when you're dealing with children that have had trauma and repeated trauma, it looks different. And this is what the article said. I'm going to give you some. This was from the Philadelphia Tribune article, and it was done in 2016 in September. And it says it was talking about how they prepare the children for another school year, and how African Americans are not as aware as they should be about one of the biggest detriments to their child's success, trying to educate kids who have been affected by trauma. Many students will be taking their seats in classrooms with fresh memories of their violence, written homes and communities. And like I said before, when you've come from a disenfranchised and impoverished community, as I had myself have come from, you're exposed to a lot of stressors, you're exposed to a lot of violence in your home, in your community, and even at school and with your peers. So it's a day to day occurrence. And if you've had that traumatic experience again in your home or in your community, it is going to affect you in a very adverse way as you grow and develop into an adult. And so the article goes on to talk about it becomes a media cliche, and it has become a cliche to compare neighborhoods plagued by gun violence to a war zone. The combat metaphors range from children caught in the crossfire to explosions of gang war to SWAT like police teams patrolling the streets. But behind the bleak imagery lies the hidden collateral damage of people's tender psychological wounds. It's an epidemic of trauma related stress in the hospitals, schools, and living rooms of these beleaguered communities. And it talks more about students can experience a wide range of traumatic events that can impact their functioning in school. The prevalence of trauma exposure among youth is a major public health concern, with a third of adolescents nationally reporting that they have been in a physical fight in the past 12 months, and 9% having been threatened or injured with a weapon on school property. Studies have documented the broad range of negative consequences of trauma exposure for youth, including post traumatic stress disorder, other anxiety problems, depressive symptoms, and disassociation. And again, like I talked about earlier, I'm going to delve into the different sorts of trauma and talk about what the disorders come out of having that kind of trauma. And the article, this particular article, talks about post traumatic stress disorder. Now, you hear that term when we talk about veterans that have been over in the Iraqi war, or veterans who have been in any of the wars, going back as far as the Vietnam War. But that term didn't come into fruition until, the past couple wars that we've had. And scientists, psychologists, they've deemed this term post-traumatic stress disorder, and people are being treated for, and they're finding more and more innovative ways to treat veterans. And also, I'm finding as I'm continuing to do the research on this particular topic that there are some schools, there are some early learning development centers in the United States that are now recognizing that trauma exists and how to work with children who continue to have traumatic experiences. Because when you're living in the inner city, you're going to have more than one. It's, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have more than one traumatic experience. And in my case, I had several traumatic experiences from the time I was a little girl all the way up until even now. So, to say in the least that trauma does not affect you as an adult, that is just totally a lie. But it is my endeavor to bring to the forefront and to give you knowledge about trauma in childhood and how the adverse effects will continue on from adolescence into adulthood if there are no interventions, if there is no awareness, if there are no type of supports put in place for children who have experienced trauma. And then, lastly, in this article, it talks about the American classroom, and it talks about mental health, mental illness, and how the Surgeon General's report on children's mental health indicated that approximately 20% of children and adolescents have an emotional disorder, and that 5% have a severe mental health disorder. The report also noted that only 1 out of 5 students who have emotional disorders receives any treatment. If treatment occurs, it is most likely to be provided by a primary care physician rather than a mental health professional. And that is ridiculous. But it shows up again. Trauma shows up in your physical body. Trauma shows up in your daily life. So that's why you see a primary care physician treating a child with a traumatic experience. They have a lot of different ailments. They're sick, they don't feel good, they have headaches, things of that nature. And I haven't even gotten to that part of it yet. I'm just getting to the surface of what the discussion is about. But again, I've created the series so that we can discuss this and you can comment and we can get feedback on how do we combat this? How do we be proactive? How do we recognize what childhood trauma looks like? And how do we help assist those with childhood trauma? And that's the reason why I've started this series. So, again, this is the third part. I will come back to you again and to continue to this discussion. And as I often say, make your day great and live your life on purpose. Why do I keep saying that each time I create a video? Because if you've had trauma of any sort, it's hard to live your life on purpose. Because you don't know what your purpose is, because you're dealing with all that emotional baggage that occurs as a result of being traumatized. So I say that so that we can together work through this phenomena that is plaguing our society, that's plaguing our communities, especially, like I said, impoverished, disenfranchised communities where there are not a lot of supports in place because of all the governmental issues about not having money to fund different social programs. And we see it more and more now. All of those programs that they had in place in the 80s with different administrations, different presidents coming in, we no longer have that. We don't have the state support, the local support. as it relates to having money and resources to continue to work through the issues that children have who have come from a traumatic background. So I think it's important to really talk about this. It's important to delve into this. It's important to really bring this out to the forefront. Again, I am Lady T, and this is, in my own words, my thought of the day, part three of childhood trauma. And I will continue. As I often say again, make your day great, live your life on purpose. Take care, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.